My intention for this morning was to actually keep things a bit lighter because I knew it was Father's Day. I knew it was still the beginning of summer. I knew some of the movies coming up in this Faith and Film series, at least from my end. We'll see what Reverend Jessica does when she gets here in just a couple of weeks. But we'll be looking at movies like Hotel Rwanda. Not exactly a light film, is it? Deals with genocide and injustice and the things that keep us from really dealing with injustice. A movie like Flight, starring Denzel Washington. Again, not exactly a light film, but a beautiful one, dealing with themes of honesty and dishonesty and all the freedom that comes with honesty. So my intention this morning was to keep things a bit lighter. But as you know, the world has a way of happening, doesn't it? Because last Sunday morning, we all woke up to Orlando. Did you feel it? Feel like you got kicked in the stomach? Or feel like someone took your breath away? Again? So this morning, I hope to talk with you very honestly and candidly. And I hope that if I say some things that are outside of your experience or outside of the way that you see things, I hope you can extend grace to me. I hope we can be in conversation. I hope we can still walk together as community. Because I don't know about you, but by Sunday afternoon last week, there was this kind of dark silence that came over me. I didn't want to reflect on another mass shooting. I didn't want to have to think about it. It's tiring. You know what's tiring? Changing another Sunday theme and another Sunday sermon because of another mass shooting in this country. And I realize in saying this that I'm not even one of the immediate victims. I didn't know any of the victims. Didn't know their friends and family. But it still raises all the same questions, doesn't it? Is the world getting worse? Is hope just an empty exercise? Are things getting worse, or are we going to be okay? And do we talk with our kids about this? And if so, how? Did you feel it? The isolation and loneliness. You know, we were at a conference, annual conference, Thursday through Sunday, required for us clergy. So Janet, Sally, and I were at annual conference. Many from this congregation were there as well. Got home on Sunday afternoon, and on Sunday evening, we gathered around the dinner table and had dinner together. That doesn't always happen, by the way, but it did on that evening. And we prayed for the victims and their families and their friends. We prayed for the shooter and his family and friends. And you know, after we finished dinner, my wife says to me, "It's kind of like you're here, but you're not really here, are you?" You ever felt that? The isolation and loneliness that comes with the heaviness. And by the way, it's part of the beauty of vigils and gathering together as community. But also, with that isolation and loneliness, feeling this deep sense of human interconnection. Because all of a sudden, in that moment, maybe you experienced it, your heart was with the people of Orlando, was with people who were suffering. People you weren't thinking about the day before or the week before. Did you feel it? And I just want to take a moment and affirm all the feelings or emotions you might have experienced. Natural, normal, healthy, good. Don't suppress them. Don't ignore them. Or maybe if you're like me, you experienced a raging anger this week. Because I have to tell you, I have to be honest. The thought kept coming over me throughout the week. Really? It's 2016 and you can still legally purchase an assault rifle, a weapon that's used to take the life of another person. Really? And let me give a disclaimer here. I'm a gun owner. I grew up from about the age I could walk hunting with my dad, my brother, my cousins, my grandpa. I got my first gun when I was 6 years old. My dad gave it to me on my 6th birthday. It was the same gun he was given on his 6th birthday. But seriously, it's 2016 and you can still legally purchase an assault rifle. Does it make you angry? Or when this shooter, this guy who caused so much violence and destruction, before doing so, when he pledges his loyalty to a group called ISIS, a group that is bent on death and destruction, does it make you angry? And he targeted the LGBT community, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender community, a people who have already been so wounded, a group of people who have already been so wounded by my own people, the people called Christians. Does it make you angry? And all the time, when we face tragedies like this, the same question comes up. We ask the same question, and it's an important one. Where is God in all of this? You see it, you feel it. Where's God in all of this? And so Monday morning, I wake up and I listen to a podcast, like I do on most Monday mornings. And I'm glad I did on this Monday morning, because he started by saying, is something deep within you saying, this isn't right. Things shouldn't be this way. It doesn't have to be this way. This isn't in order with the universe. He said, that's God. That's God. The divine presence is that which wells up within you and rises and says it doesn't have to be this way. Things shouldn't be this way. It's out of order with the universe. And now, if you're like me, you're seeing all kinds of divisions, all kinds of new divisions, and the possibility of new divisions and barriers and walls. And in the podcast, he goes on to say, in certain moments, you become aware of a human solidarity. We become aware of all the things we have in common, and this transcends all the labels and categories and divisions that we've cooked up for our own ego. And we're pretty good at that, right? Cooking up categories, divisions, and labels to feed our own ego. So in the movie Hotel Transylvania 2, which, by the way, if you haven't seen it, you've got to watch this one. It's funny, it's animated, it's got great and profound, significant themes. But in the movie, Grandpa Dracula so badly wants his grandson, his new grandson, to be a vampire just like him. And so remember, Dracula's daughter is vampire. She marries a human. They have a baby, so it could go either way. This baby could be vampire or this baby could be human. Dracula so badly wants him to be like him. So he goes about love in all the wrong ways. He forces things. He pushes things. He wants Dennis's fangs to sprout, and they have to sprout in the vampire world by the age of 5 to prove that he's really a vampire. And there's this great scene in the film where Kelsey, the human grandma, looks at little Dennis and then looks at Dracula, and she says to Dracula, "Are you sure he's a vampire?" How does Dracula respond? "Of course he is. Look at him. He's just like me." And as you're watching the movie, the real question becomes, yes, well, what if he's not just like you? Are you still going to love him? Are you still going to treat him as your own? So I don't like to throw around statistics just for the sake of throwing around statistics. But let me remind you, when it comes to our LGBT youth, if I can have the slide, please, they are 4 times more likely than their straight peers to attempt suicide. And when it comes to our LGBT youth, they are twice as likely to be bullied in school. And when it comes to our LGBT youth, 4 out of 10 of them say they don't feel accepted and they don't feel like they belong. And let me remind you also, in the United Methodist Book of Discipline, in our own tradition, it still states in there that homosexuality is incompatible with Christian teaching. Why do I mention these things? Because he didn't just walk into a random club in Orlando, did he? He chose Pulse, a gay nightclub, which targeted the LGBT community. I don't want to throw around statistics just for the sake of throwing around statistics. But let me remind you, nearly 50% of all Muslim students in the U.S. have been bullied by their peers. And let me remind you, the majority of Muslims living in the U.S. are immigrants, and even if they gain citizenship, studies suggest they are still widely perceived as not being truly American. And let me remind you, in June 2015, a survey by the Public Religion Institute, 33% of Americans said being a Christian was very important for being truly American. Do you feel it? Are you hearing the rhetoric that's used against our Muslim brothers and sisters? I hear it. Oh, we know those Muslims. Oh, we know Islam. Have you read the Quran? Oh, it's violent. It supports violence. Oh, it even encourages violence. My friends, let us tread lightly when we begin critiquing a tradition that's not ours. Have you read our scriptures? Have you read the Holy Bible, our sacred text? Because you know, if we wanted to, we could start picking and choosing verses to support our most violent actions. Pick and choose verses to support violence towards a group of people. And we could start with the LGBT community. Wouldn't you hate for someone to come along and say, oh, I know those Christians. Oh, I know Christianity. Have you read their book? It's violent. It supports violence. It encourages violence. Let's tread lightly, because we can be pretty good at creating divisions, building walls and barriers, jumping to that mentality of us versus them. It's either us or them. Oh, come on, be like us. Be like us, and then you can truly be one of us. Conform and see it the way we see it. Then you can truly be one of us. Come on now, show me your fangs. Sprout some fangs. Are you truly one of us or not? See, if we're not careful, we can start acting a lot like Dracula, can't we? Are you sure he's a vampire? Of course he is. Look at him. He's just like me. And yeah, well, what if they're not just like us? Will we still love them? Will we embrace them? Treat them as our own? But even Dracula can have a change of heart. Take a look. So how do we respond to tragedy? To those events that leave us feeling isolated and alone, and yet strangely connected to other people? Paul begins writing this letter to the Philippians, the people, this church in Philippi, a church that he actually started. And Philippi, an interesting city. Philippi was an urban center in a Roman colony. And so those living in Philippi would have been afforded all kinds of privileges. First and foremost, they would have had Roman citizenship. Now, the people in Philippi, they also would have known the violence and destruction that surrounded them. They would have been eerily familiar with the terrorism brought on by the Roman Empire. The first century Roman Empire, the most brutal empire the world has ever known. And perhaps they were asking this little church in the city of Philippi the same questions that we ask. Is the world getting worse? Is hope just an empty exercise? Are things getting worse, or are we going to be okay? And do we talk with our kids about this? And if so, how? Paul, from a prison cell, the place that defines isolation and loneliness, Paul begins writing this letter, and he prays this prayer for his people. This is my prayer, that your love might become even more and more rich with knowledge and all kinds of insight. I pray this so that you will be able to decide what really matters. What really matters? Paul is talking about transformation. People becoming a different kind of people. And how do you know when transformation happens? How do you mark it? You know it happens when you show up to the party and everyone's invited. Monsters, vampires, humans, everyone's invited. Vlad, Dracula's dad, which means Dennis, the little grandson, his great-grandfather, Vlad hated humans. But even Vlad can have a change of heart. Even Vlad can decide what really matters. Even Vlad can show up to the party where all are invited, and Vlad can do a new thing. This is how the movie ends. Take a look. By the way, if you're a grandparent, you have to watch this movie. It is so good. You'll appreciate it. In fact, everyone should watch this movie. You'll appreciate it. So how do we respond when it comes to tragedies like Orlando? We can build barriers. We can build walls. We can create divisions and labels and categories. Or we can respond with love and decide what really matters. Simple acts of love. Sometimes it's the best way to counter acts of violence. It's the best form of resistance. And so this morning, I asked you all to bring socks. So in these bins, there's socks, unfolded. So you all got to work together a little bit. If you'd like, during this song and video, a song by Gunger, by the way, the same artist who does Beautiful Things. Y'all know that song? It's a song called Us for Them. Beautiful lyrics. It's going to play on the screen. Very relevant for what we've been talking about today. So during that video and song, if you want to come forward and fold a pair of socks. And as you fold a pair of socks, you can take one of these blessings on the table. They're in different colors. And you can tuck a little blessing in the socks. Now, my wife, Tammy, will tell you there's a way to fold socks, and I'll tell you another way. So, and my way is the right way. You know this, right? Not to create divisions and barriers. But when you fold them, just take them and do like that. Leave a little tail out maybe if you want. How do you do it, Tammy? She leaves a really big tail, I think, is what it is. Or tucks it all the way in sometimes. You can pick how you want to fold it, but stick a blessing in there. If you'd like to skip that part and go to one of our prayer kneelers and just offer a prayer, you're welcome to do that. Or you can do both. If you're the type of person that says, man, I just want to sit and reflect and see this video on the screen, you can certainly do that. You are not being forced to come up front. But this is your time to move or to stay seated. Amen.